All right. So what's happening is people come on the post and they're not understanding the truth about what happened in history and what the difference is between the United States of America and the United States Corporation. And so they say to me, well, no, George Washington was the first president of the United States, and then there wasn't no United States before 1789. No, that's not true. We look at that with the Declaration of Independence, was clearly telling you there was a United States. Not to mention, they're calling these presidents before George Washington, they're calling that the Continental Congress. Why? Why? Because those were Moors. Those were Moors that came from other lands. And when they came in, they had established this other government. Remember I told you about the 13th Amendment and why it's so important that, well, the issue is that the founders, and when they say founding fathers, they want you to think Albion people, light-skinned, these so-called white people. They weren't. These were Moors. And that's why they're not telling you about those presidents before George Washington. So we have a situation where these Moors had, we call them elite Moors because they just had a higher knowledge of law and how to implement law. They established these counties. Remember those 13 colonies that Britain had? When they created the Declaration, what the Moors, these elite Moors, was telling Britain is, you no longer have access to those 13 colonies. Let me make this clear. Those 13 colonies were businesses. And Britain was making a lot of money off those 13 colonies because they had the original people of the land paying them all this money, taxes, for some kind of protection in those colonies. And then here comes these elite Moors saying, nah, Britain, y'all gotta leave. We're kicking you out. The Revolutionary War was because of that, because Britain was like, no, you're not gonna take my money. We're ready to fight about it. That's why it came about. Okay, so now I need this to be understood as far as the difference between the United States. By this time, the United States Corporation, it didn't come into effect until 1871. But here comes George Washington in 1789. And in 1789, George Washington rewrote the Constitution. He rewrote it. And that was a fraudulent Constitution because remember that 13th Amendment in the Constitution, it said no royalty. Well, George Washington was a direct descendant to the Queen of England. He was never supposed to be president. Well, you might be thinking, well, why does it matter? He was president and so it doesn't matter. Well, this is why it matters. The reason why the original founders, they didn't want royalty in, because once royalty gets into the country like that, it takes over. It spreads like a virus. And so I need you to understand that George Washington, all the way to Obama, they are related by blood. I'm going to say this again, and you can go and look this up for yourself. George Washington, all the way to Obama, are related by blood. And they are direct descendants. George Washington is a direct descendant of the Queen of England. None of these people were supposed to be president of the United States of America. And so what happened is, you got to understand that since George Washington, Britain has been running the United States of America. They infiltrated. Yeah, they lost the battle. They lost the battle whereby the Revolutionary War, Britain lost. But they won when the people allowed Washington to become president. And once that happened, they wouldn't relinquish their title or their rulership over the United States of America. And they're still running it to this day, whether Barack is in or not, because the people are clueless about the difference between the United States versus the United States of America. Okay, I hope we made that clear, that Washington couldn't have been the first president of the United States of America. There were presidents before him. They were melanated. And once again, the reason why you wouldn't be told about that is because that would defeat the narrative that melanated people came in here on slave ships. They did it. There was another group of people who came in here on slave ships. As a matter of fact, we talk about what the term slave means. Again, just to reiterate it, because I'm going to go on to the next topic. George Washington was a president who was a direct descendant of the Queen of England. He was a crony. Once he entered, this is when Britain took rulership over the Americas. And there were presidents before him, and they were melanated. We never hear about them because of that, because there's a narrative that they're teaching you in school. Who are they? Who owns those organizations? Well, those people are under British rule too. All of your major book publishing companies, they are owned by those who are running this whole political game. So they're not going to tell you the truth about where you came from unless you're willing to study. All right, so this is to those who are in the comment section with all of the noise about, well, you know, he was the first president, he was the first on the, because that was the Continental Congress. That wasn't the United States of America. It absolutely was the United States of America. And the Constitution that you know of today is not the organic Constitution. It's not the original Constitution. Remember to keep that bell on for notifications. Follow UNA Republic for more great information.